Arani, here we go again. We're doing another podcast.
We are back. We're back.
David Chernitzky, CEO and the co-founder of Armour Cybersecurity. We are a Toronto-based company operating globally today, providing full range of cyber defense services, anything from advisory, professional services, managed services, incident response for clients around the globe. And I have with me today Arani Adhikari, our Chief Strategy Officer.
Perfect. Thank you. We are back. We are back again with another episode. My name is Arani. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Armour Cybersecurity. I'll go a bit more on the background for me this time because, again, it's relevant to the topic at hand, right? Listen, I was born and brought up in cybersecurity consulting world. Spent many years in the Big Four consulting world. Did variety of work from offensive cybersecurity to defensive side and strategy work and M&A, which is the topic of the day, right? So M&A or mergers and acquisition, right? We did a lot of these engagements back in the day, and we still do now as Armour. We have started getting into these service lines, right? So why is cybersecurity, an essential part of a M&A cycle or a merger and acquisition cycle, right? Traditionally, when businesses were buying other businesses, they were looking at the books. They're looking at whether fraud was happening in the books or not, right? They're talking about what kind of people they're buying, what kind of technology stack they're buying, right? But recently,
what kind of clients they're getting.
What kind of clients they're getting, right? But recently we have seen this trend where cybersecurity is a consideration, and actually it's a big consideration during this M&A process, right? So when a business is buying another business or a business is selling itself or getting ready for a sale, they are making sure their cybersecurity game is on point, right? Now, this is, again, as we do with a lot of these cyber topics, it keeps changing in terms of the trend lines, but this is a very recent development. It never used to happen before, right? We used to do a lot of the IT or the technology due diligence where you're understanding what technology you're buying into, what kind of stack you're buying into. But cyber was just one line item maybe. And now it's, back in my, Big Four consulting days, we used to do a lot of the cybersecurity due deal as part of bigger deal teams, right? So David, maybe we'll start with some examples which has driven this trend up of why cyber is important in M&A.
Arani, I always love your Big Four consulting jargon, due deal.
Due deal.
It's a new word for me in English, but I learned that I'll start using it. I like to give that example always because at the end of the day, companies are not coming cheap.
Yeah.
It's not like you spending $200 and you lost it again. Sometimes you buying a $500,000 business, sometimes $4 million, and sometimes $400 million.
Yeah.
We'll not mention Wiz 32 billion acquisition that just happened, but I'm sure they did a lot of cyber.
I'm sure they did the due diligence for 32 billion.
But it's a topic for different discussion. And what it means as an acquiring business, you want to understand that are you buying an asset or you buying a liability, right? And like you mentioned, different types of due diligence that companies did so far traditionally. Many times work well, but in the recent years, we've seen examples that a company comes to acquire a business operating and working, and eventually, once they got it, 6 weeks after announcement, they're getting ransomware. And we dealt with quite a few cases like that, helping companies to recover from this situation. And the common denominator that we found in these cases that the way how attackers work, they many times have an initial foothold in an environment. It's already infected, poor hygiene. They just keeping it for later whenever they will have time to deal with that organization, or maybe waiting for a big deal to happen. And whenever a big company acquiring this smaller guy, they know one thing, that they will bring their processes, they will bring their controls, they will bring their people, they will tighten the security controls. Most probably their window will close. This is why they pull trigger.
Correct.
Very close to the moment that
timeliness.
Timeliness.
It's very timely.
And I giving one example, but it's an example that we've seen many
times.
Many
Yes,
times
yes.
in our practice. Yeah. Yeah. And Arani, if you have some other examples,
The other example that to kind of add on this one, right? So we have seen from the other way around as well, right? Like where unfortunately, clients have bought into liabilities, right? Again, like with anything in security, we always talk about shifting left or moving the security process right up start. In a due diligence process, security cannot be the end state, right? Security should not be an afterthought in that, right? Again, we have seen examples of clients buying certain businesses, right, and discovering that they were already infected, and the companies were already breached from the get-go, right? So during that integration process, when the two businesses sort of work together and has a combined workflow and a combined strategic roadmap, we do end up seeing, unfortunately, again, hacked clients or hacked assets, right, in the organization. It shouldn't be the afterthought. It should really be at the start of the process itself, right? So maybe let's talk about a bit on, you touched upon an important point on buying certain businesses for certain valuations. How does it impact valuation, right, of a business when it comes to cybersecurity due diligence?
So this is actually my favorite thing, because like as a human being, everyone like to get a good deal, right?
Of course.
And if you are going to pay money for a certain asset, that it's always negotiation. Usually is the seller asking for a certain amount, buyer willing to pay usually a bit less or a lot less. How do you get to a
happy middle?
To happy middle, or actually, I promised myself never say happy middle, because like I read recently Chris Voss' book, Never Splits the Difference. So, but it's again, it's off topic.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that you buying an asset or not liability? How do you ensure that you de-risking the deal?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, and there's 2015. I think Marriott was one of the notable breaches that once merger happened. Do you bring someone that will impact your organization inside of your organization? So to do that, you need to do cyber due diligence. And if you see significant gaps, for example, that it will cost you time to change the processes, to implement controls. Maybe there is significant gaps in technology. This deficit usually takes time to close and costs money to close.
Yeah.
You can put it as part of the negotiation strategy.
Correct.
Say, hey, it will cost me X amount of millions. Out of that amount, I need to reduce the cost. Right?
Yeah.
This is one aspect. Another aspect, maybe you're not properly secured and you're buying an asset in industry where legal exposure is high.
Yes.
People can sue you.
Mm-hmm.
You can incorporate that into pricing as well. And every business is different, every case is different, but you need to look how do you leverage as a buyer to your benefit this aspect. And what we see in the recent years, actually a lot of sellers, they actually don't want to get caught
Correct.
in those situations, so they're actually actively preparing for that.
Exactly.
They cleaning their act, they implementing processes, controls, technology to ensure that it's not impacting their valuations.
Yeah, and the terminology that we use for the sell side due diligence and buy side due diligence. Another aspect, there's a very recent example that I read on, right? So it was a company in UK, 150-year-old business, huge value, right? Again, they got ransomware, right? And unfortunately, sometimes ransomware is an extinction event for a lot of businesses, right? They actually went down, they basically, again, it was a group out of Russia, and the threat actor was out of it's a pretty famous ransomware threat actor out of Russia. And what the business owner at the end said, look, the family built up the business over centuries, and now in 3 months, right, the business value was net zero because they ceased to operate, right? They couldn't recover from that event anymore. So whenever we talk about cybersecurity and valuation, there is a very close knit right now. It's one of the risk areas, right, that we are seeing a lot of companies are taking into consideration and giving special focus on, because they know cyber, an event, a cyber event, a ransomware event, a data breach event can actually, bring down the business and essentially kind of have a, again, if you're buying the company, it's a write-off, right? It's going to be a write-off at the end.
It can be a write-off, and it can be multi-million, hundreds
Yeah.
of million write-off.
Absolutely.
We've seen that again. We cannot go to examples, but those discussion coming to light at executive rooms for organizations that not preparing for that.
Exactly.
They're not preparing for that.
They're not preparing. And look, the trend is they are starting to kind of see that. Hopefully, with the sort of education, they can kind of look that a bit more and in a specific lens with a specific focus and lens. Now that we have given some examples on the what things can go wrong, let's talk about how we can prepare for that event, right? So maybe let's talk about the M&A or merger and acquisition life cycle, right? Like with anything, there is a structured process of buying, operating the company, and selling a company, right? If you look at a deal life cycle, those are the typical ways an investor, a private equity organization, or anybody who is in the business of buying business, right, will look at it, right? So they'll buy companies, they'll operate the companies, they'll grow in value, and then they'll sell off the companies, right? So maybe let's talk about each of these aspects. So from a buy side perspective, right? So say for example, David, you're buying, maybe you had the chance to buy Wiz for 32 billion or any other company for a lesser value. It's short of a couple of bucks. Yeah, that's it. But say for example, you're buying a company. What are the typical things you're looking for from a technology and a security perspective?
So, and maybe let's also talk about steps, right?
Yes.
So obviously, once you looking to buy a company, you're looking. First of all, you need to define what you're looking for, and what happens. Either you work with broker or you're looking for deals yourself. What you do basically, you're doing a silent due diligence or pre-due diligence evaluation, right?
Correct.
There is a lot of things can be done from cyber perspective at this stage. I'll get back to that steps. So this is stage number one.
Yeah.
Once you dialed on a specific asset and you saying, this is a company I want to buy, I want to go in, I want to learn in depth what is going. This is exactly the due diligence stage that coming in. This is the next step. And of course, once a deal happens, let's say everyone came to the happy middle with the price, companies are merging. How do you perform these PMI activities? How do you merge overall cultures? But in our context, how do you bring cybersecurity standards of one organization with another? And of course, like it's a whole topic that we'll talk about it. So if you go back to stage one, silent due diligence, that you're looking, is it right company to buy? Maybe you're looking at fantastic company that the selling side packaged it.
Yeah.
The sell side gave you the best feeling, warm and fuzzy, that this is a business I want to buy. But then you're doing a quick dark web search and be helping to the organizations to see, is this organization already leaking?
Yeah.
Do they have their data for sale? Maybe their IP for sale.
Yep.
If you're buying a company based on IP and it's already for sale on dark web,
exactly.
this is a zero.
Exactly.
You should not pay.
It's not intellectual property anymore.
It's
right?
not intellectual property anymore. So there is a lot of stuff can be done, and I think in one of the previous podcasts we spoke about third-party risk. Like, do they have vendors that leaking? Do they have extremely sloppy external posture that eventually means that inside it will be extremely poorly managed as well from cybersecurity? So at this stage, it might decide, do I proceed to due diligence or not? Because due diligence, it's a usually costly process.
Exactly.
You bring consultants, you bring lawyers, you bring finance folks, it costs you money. So this is stage number one. And it can help you to reduce the funnel of companies that you actually want to look at. And whenever a due diligence process starts, the official due diligence, you look at all traditional areas, but then you need to bring cybersecurity experts that will look at 360 degree of this organization and evaluate their governance processes, capacities in terms of people, controls, technology, what are the blind spot. Eventually, cyber due diligence looks at the business risk associated with cyber to that specific organization.
Yeah.
And in a simple words, many times it's like, what is their ability to operate if they're attacked,
Right.
and what is their ability to protect their revenue.
Yeah.
You need to look at those two things if you boil it down to the bare minimum. And of course, this due diligence gives those insights that we mentioned. We are doing extremely well. Everything is good, great. Like maybe you need to pay a bit more asset because it's a great company. But if they're not doing well,
Yeah,
maybe pay less.
I think what you alluded to is the breach readiness,
The
right?
breach readiness.
How ready
Exactly.
they are, right? If they were attacked, right, today with a ransomware, with any sort of threat actor, how ready are they to respond to it? I think the other angle that we also kind of talk about in this sort of diligence areas is compromise assessment, right? Actually going in, as you said, like from the dark web, I think you can get an idea of whether they're leaking outside, right? Whether the data is already up for sale. But can we also, and this is again when once you go down into a deeper due diligence, right, when you have decided and you have a LOI, right, letter of intent, right, to actually make a potential transaction, we would go in and actually do compromise assessments as well for assets, right? So we would go in and see, we would put our sensors in, right, we would see whether there are hackers in the environment today, right, that are just waiting to pull the trigger, right? So, and a lot of times we do find a lot of compromises, right? A lot of times we do find these sort of areas come up, right? And again, it's not just this one area, right? Cyber again as a whole, and I'm sure we'll cover this in our future podcast of the various other facets of cybersecurity. But at a minimum, right, there are certain minimum controls that are needed, right? The whether they're leaking on dark web, whether compromise assessment has been done, those are at a minimum things that should be done in a due diligence period.
Compromise assessment eventually, just to chew it down a bit more for viewers, if you see compromise, it doesn't mean that you will not buy this asset. It gives you understanding what risk.
I think it gives you a leverage.
It gives you leverage.
It gives you leverage.
But also the responsible thing will be instead of taking it over and then figuring it out, you can put as a part of the deal that you have to have certain
Fix it.
controls.
You have to fix before you can buy.
So you can start day one
Exactly.
without being concerned that someone will pull the trigger and ransomware the environment. Take
Yeah.
it down, and you will not be able to operate. So this is just many times I'm saying it's like you driving towards a deal without the black bag on your hat. You actually see where you're going.
You know what you're buying.
You know what you're buying.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And some of the other aspects just in that, right? Like another trend that we have seen in this industry, right? So again, we work with a lot of houses that their sole business is to buy another business, right? That's how they operate. They are group companies, right? They buy businesses in certain industries, right? They operate them, grow in value, sell, right? And in that space, we have seen again these various steps that we are talking about being very standardized. Right. Yeah. So they have templates of what is the minimum level of security controls they would want to see before they buy you. Right. So a lot of times they're actually using that in negotiations in their deals because they're going in and saying like, hey, we are interested in this purchase, but before we actually go through this transaction or go through any sort of discussion on the pricing, right? You need to ensure that you have XYZ in place, right? Which is actually a very good driver because now you're standardizing security across the portfolio of the companies that you hold, right? So the standardizing the templates, right? So David, maybe if you want to give an example of why this standardization of template, right, is important, right? When for clients who are in the business of buying business.
Because I think it's a real. Those clients usually in business of making money, and this is the guys like private equity firms. They very dialed on what need to be done and how it need to be done. And at the end of the day, why they're doing it? Because it's unfortunately lessons learned from some deals that you buy an asset. 6 weeks after that, it's ransomware, then you need to write off $300 million. It's not a good day for any business, and especially in private equity firms that they're in business of leverage, like
right, growing value,
growing value, and they're selling it going forward. So, and at the end of the day, I'm always saying it's not a rocket science, but we know today the reality is that shortage of cyber. Trained people in cybersecurity is around 3.5 million people globally. And if you're buying a low-tech manufacturing firm and they have, let's say, 500 people
Yeah.
revenue of 200 million. They have 4 IT people, clueless in cyber.
Yeah.
Clueless.
They won't have the specialization to deal with cyber.
The best, and nothing wrong with IT people, but they just simply don't have access to cybersecurity experts.
Correct.
If you will not follow these standardized checks and will ensure that they actually not compromised.
Yeah.
If they're compromised, you need to take a proactive step before you buying.
Right.
If they are not compromised, how much it will cost to fix you? You might get yourself in trouble.
Exactly.
This is why it have to be standardized.
Yeah.
Every deal.
Exactly.
Every deal.
And now that we talk about the buy side, right? Like we talked about what kind of steps you are taking. Let's talk a bit on what happens after you buy them, right? So again, businesses who are in the business of buying business, right? So when it comes to the portfolio, right, there is an increasing again trend that we see in the market of monitoring their cyber risk, right? So portfolio-wide cyber risk monitoring as an example, right? Why? Because once you have bought the business, again, there is no guarantee that they won't be hacked in future, right? And while you're in that space where you're growing the value and you're potentially eyeing for a sale of that asset at a later date, and that's how you'll make the money as this. There is a trend that we are seeing where people are continuously monitoring their portfolio companies. Again, in a previous podcast, we talked about various ways this monitoring can take place, right? But at the same time, when they see a change in the security posture of a portfolio company, they're going in and asking question as management, right? Whether everything is okay, whether they got hacked, whether they know they got hacked or not, right? So we are seeing a lot of the portfolio companies today continuously monitoring cyber risk, right, as one of the risk areas, right, apart from the other obviously risk areas that they operate and monitor, right? Let's
and maybe Arani, this is one example, and no acquisition is the same exactly.
Yeah.
You can take similar approach, similar checks, but it's always different, and in a post-acquisition merger that usually happens.
The integration phase.
The integration phase. We see some companies you buy and you keep it as a separate entity. They can continue operate, and this is where you can apply portfolio approach. But many times we see the bigger guy absorbing the smaller guy. They just bring them in.
Yes.
And the question, how do you know that you're not bringing that something that will impact you?
Yeah.
Even cultural stuff.
Yeah.
Some people... Till today, it's 2025 March. We see people you coming. You have this one computer with Windows 7. Everyone use same username.
Everybody's a local admin
to the most sensitive crown jewels of the organization.
Yeah.
You bring company like that. Let's say you have decent cybersecurity. How do you manage that? So how do you merge those cultures, and how do you taking? At the end of the day, it's not a rocket science, but everything that you need to implement, you need to manage it. Otherwise, it will not happen.
And I think the key word over here is the top-down approach in that, right? Culture is again driven from the top, right? Culture, you need to drive that set and have examples of it, right, from the top. Like you said, if you're absorbing a company that uses Windows 7, everybody is a local admin, no antivirus, nothing, right? And you're bringing them in an organization where there is a decent level of security.
And by the way, they complain they're not willing to give up their comfort.
Exactly, right? But once you bring that company in, now you're effectively creating a backdoor. You're exposing, you're creating more attack exposure or attack surface exposure for your company. Right, and you don't want to do that. That's the reason. That's why it is very important to again standardize and during this merging area, during that integration cycle, it's important that they start following your security practices and culture.
Yeah,
right?
No, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And let's not talk about on the sales side a bit, right? I think we have a few clients, David, where we have helped them again demonstrate. Again, we use the word demonstrate, but demonstrate security posture during a sales side. What are some of the examples that you have seen of controls in that space?
So I think one of the most vivid examples, I feel extremely proud of it, because it's actually our client that we educated this specific client on a lot of cybersecurity topics, and they are very driven and focused young business, growing very fast. They want to sell. And about year and a half before they actually want to sell, they started to tighten their cybersecurity. They asked, guys, what do I need to do to maximize my value once I'm selling?
Yep.
And eventually, it's relatively small client, but we help them to build processes, controls, technological stack that protects them, that few due diligence that they didn't sell yet, but they're getting there. We went through 2 due diligences with those guys, and there was nothing on cybersecurity negative, and it's actually, they used it for their advantage to say, hey, listen, go find competitor our size that actually doing that.
So it's actually an enabler, right? So at the end of the day, it's a competitive advantage to have, right?
Exactly.
The other example, again, on very similar lines, another client of ours, right? So who have actually gone ahead and gotten proactive due diligence done, right? So during the sell side process, they have actually gone ahead and actually done the assessments, cleaned up everything that they would expect an auditor to kind of come and ask. But at the same time, like, this is what is helping them differentiate themselves among the other competitors who are trying to get bought off, right? So definitely it's a business enabler today. We always try to say cybersecurity is a business enabler. These are real life examples, right, where cybersecurity is providing a competitive advantage.
And being myself a business owner and just looking at other cases where people didn't do that, and it cost them many times millions of dollars. So if you're okay to lose millions of dollars and not spend it upfront a bit and being proactive, at the end of the day, all of that, it's a risk as appreciation and input to...
it's risk management. It's a pure play risk management.
To the deal, that be you on sell side or buy side. But at the end of the day, you might find business that it's compromised and there's gaps. You will still buy it, but you need to understand what you're stacking.
Exactly. And you need to be aware of it. Exactly.
And if you're not taking care of your cyber hygiene and you're not ready to sell, and instead of X, you'll get 0.7X, and you fine with that, it's your decision.
I think we're yet to find a person who would be okay with that. I hope we don't find one.
I didn't find one yet, but
exactly.
It might happen. And I think, Arani, it's a good segue to talk a bit about trends and
absolutely
what we see in the industry and basically who is active in this space of cybersecurity due diligence. So if you can talk about that.
Absolutely. So right now, in terms of our client space, we have different types of businesses, right? So we have family offices, we have private equity firms, we even work with individuals, right? Again, high net worth individuals who are in a business of investing, not even buying and acquiring 100% stake, but investing in companies and businesses, right? And what we're looking over here, again, the trend that we are seeing, which is again a very positive trend to have, is having due diligence for cybersecurity performed during the acquisition process, right? Again, they are becoming extremely aware of fact that there are ransomware situations, there are data breach situations, there are situations where the company is hacked and they don't even know about it, right? Now, apart from the fact that they're actually doing this due diligence once they acquire the stake or once they actually buy this company, the other trend is the continuous monitoring of these portfolio companies, right? So on a continuous basis, they are trying to evaluate what sort of risk that these investments have. Again, anytime you are done with the investment, again, to grow it in value, there are certain risk parameters to be considered. And cyber is making up as one of the risk line items that they're looking at, right? So they're continuously monitoring their posture, continuously monitoring whether their data is getting leaked on dark web. And if there is, they would come back and do a proper, investigation of why that would happen, right? Again, we see this at growth value in there.
We can throw like IBM, I think, published last year that average breach cost for an organization in US, it's $4.5 million.
Yeah.
So think about you bought an asset and you breached 6 weeks in, $4.5 million average, maybe more, maybe less, but it's $4.5 million.
It goes to show that cybersecurity and cyber risk has real dollar impact, right? In this world, again, it's all about how much you're spending to buy an asset, right? how much value that you can grow by, right, before you sell it and make the buck on that, right? Again, I think from a trend perspective, we will keep on seeing as and when the breaches happen and more breaches and the news comes up. I think we'll keep on seeing companies taking cyber risk very seriously and having them as one of the key drivers when they're making decisions, be it buying, be it selling, be it investing more back in the company.
Absolutely, and I think with velocity of evolution, how the cyber criminals leveraging today most modern tools like AI, for their advantage. And
did you say AI again?
Yes, I said again.
We said AI again.
I realized we almost at the end, and I didn't say AI.
I think we had to cover it. Yeah.
Most probably it will be cut, but the velocity and creativity of attackers is growing, and my appreciation as well, I 100% agree with you that need for cybersecurity due diligence will only grow from here.
Exactly, which is a very positive thing to see in the industry, right? Let's talk about how Armour Cybersecurity, how we can help our clients and prospects in this space.
So, being cybersecurity companies, we are not company, we're kicking tires of few companies, but we are not actively buying daily companies. But we work today with investment banks. We're working with private equity firms. We're working with Arani, like you mentioned. We have investors that want to invest into business, and it's invaluable tool for them.
Yeah.
We are basically giving them eyes where they're going to. And we are happy to have discussions with companies that in this space, be it's a facilitator like a investment bank or a private equity firm. If you are a buyer, we can work with you directly. If you're a seller, we can help you to maximize your value out of your business. And like I mentioned before, we're operating globally today. Location really doesn't matter for us. We have clients spread around the globe, and we'll be happy to help them all.
Exactly. And if you're a portfolio company, right, who are in the process of, again, buying and selling and growing their businesses, we can actually monitor the cyber risk of your portfolio on a continuous basis. Again, this will be coupled with threat intelligence. We'll talk about these topics in future. So that's about cybersecurity and M&A.
Fantastic. Thanks for watching. We said AI only once, but we'll try. Maybe next webinar we'll try not to say AI.
Or we'll keep a track of how many times we say.
Or we'll keep.
Maybe reviewers can leave some comments on how many times we say AI. But thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening in.
It was interesting content. If you have anything specific you want us to cover next time, let us know.
Drop us ideas in the comments.
Drop us ideas on our channel. Thank you.
Perfect.